Sencha Touch provides a templating system that makes it easy to insert content in HTML format. Your templates may contain placeholders, which will be replaced with live data when your application is running. Templates also allow some flow of control, using simple conditional statements and looping constructs. This screencast will introduce the basic functionality of X-templates. When creating a panel, you can assign a template to the TPL property. You have a choice here. You could either assign an existing template object, or you could just pass a string or an array of strings, and these will be used to construct a template object dynamically. If I break one of these strings so that it spans 2 lines, it will cause a JavaScript parsing error. But if you do want to spread your template across multiple lines, there are a couple of ways to do it. You can either build an array of strings and pass the array to the constructor as a single argument, or you can pass any number of strings as arguments to the constructor. Under the hood, both of these approaches use the join function to build a single string from the fragments, so each of these examples can be considered equivalent. If you are creating a template object directly, the multiple argument approach might be considered neater. But if you are passing arguments to the TPL property whilst creating a panel, then it is necessary to wrap up each of the strings in an array. In this example, I've included 2 placeholders, one for the name and one for the mass of an object. I can render the template by calling the update function on the panel that contains my template. This function can accept an object or a collection of objects as its argument. The placeholders inside curly braces will be substituted with any properties on the object with the same label. Here, I'm passing in an object called Planet Earth. As you can see, the name and mass properties are replaced with the values from the Planet Earth object. If I use the Planet Mars object, its values will be used instead. Sencha Touch provides a handful of formatting functions which are available to use in your templates. Here, I've modified my template to include information about a planet's moons, as well as a factual summary. I've updated the Planet Mars object with these fields. Just for the sake of illustrating something, I'm going to surround the names of the moons in angle brackets. Now, when I refresh the view in the browser, you'll see that the names of the moons do not appear. Of course, this is an HTML document, so it has interpreted them as HTML tags, albeit invalid ones. There is a formatting function that will replace angle brackets with their HTML entities. I can call this function in my template by adding a trailing colon followed by the name of the function. Now, when I refresh the page, the names of the moons are visible and enclosed in angle brackets. And if we inspect the source, you'll see that the angle brackets and ampersand have both been converted to HTML entities. In the context of a template, the syntax for calling formatting functions is slightly different to how they are documented in the API. All of these functions accept a string as their first argument. But when I called the HTML encode function, I didn't pass any arguments. Under the hood, Sencha Touch calls the formatting function, passing the value before the colon as the first argument to the function. So the expression satellites :HTML encode in curly braces is equivalent to calling the HTML code function and passing satellites as an argument. Some of these functions accept more than one argument. For example, the ellipsis function expects a string, a number, and an optional boolean. When calling this from a template, you can omit the first argument to the function. This will be automatically populated using the value before the colon. You can then pass the subsequent arguments to the function in the usual manner using parentheses. All of the functionality that has been described so far is available in the template class. Sencha Touch also includes an X-template class, which includes all of the functionality discussed so far, but with some additional features that we shall now explore. In the examples so far, I've had to render the template by passing either the Planet Earth or the Planet Mars object as an argument. I would like to be able to render them both using the same template. To do this, I'm going to create an array that holds both planets and pass this to the update function. If I refresh the page now, it will look broken, because the planets object has neither a property called name nor mass. To fix this, I'm going to modify the template by wrapping it in a TPL tag. This is not rendered in the output. Instead, the TPL tag is used to control the flow, allowing simple conditional statements and looping through data structures. In this case, the for keyword creates a loop, and the dot attribute stands for the array that is passed as an argument when the update function is called. In this case, planets. When you start using TPL tags in your template, you must take care to ensure that you are using single quotes for your HTML snippets and double quotes for the attributes on each tag. If you do it the other way around, the TPL tag won't work. So watch out for this gotcha, it can be a tough one to spot. I'm going to expand my models now so that, as well as having name and mass properties, each object contains a list of moons. Next, I want to update my template so that it iterates through all of the moons and outputs their name. I can do this by creating an internal for loop on the moons variable. Note that the moons array for each planet is a flat list of strings. Up until now, whenever I've inserted content into a template, I've been able to use a named key, but here there is no name to get a handle on. Once again, the special dot variable gives us what we want. When I used the dot variable with the for attribute, it stood for the object that was passed to the template. The same applies here. The dot variable stands for the current object. When iterating through a flat array, that means it represents each item. There are a few omissions from my list of planets at the moment, so I'm going to add Mercury and Venus. Neither of these planets have any moons, so I'll assign them an empty list for the moons property. Now, I want to modify the template so that it says no moons for these objects. Previously, I used the TPL tag with the for attribute to create a loop. This time, I'm going to use the if attribute instead, which allows me to show content only if some condition is met. In this case, I want to show the text no moons if the length of the moons array is 0. When I refresh the browser, you'll see that no moons has only been rendered for the 2 planets without any moons. There is no such thing as an if-else construct in X templates, but you can achieve the same effect by creating a second if statement with the opposite test. In this case, I'll test to see if the length of moons array is greater than 0, outputting the list of moons if the test passes. If I render this now, you'll see that the template has broken. The greater than symbol is interpreted as an angle bracket closing the TPL tag. To fix this, I have to replace the greater than symbol with its HTML entity. When I refresh the browser, you'll see that the moons section is only output for the objects with a non-empty list of moons. If you don't like the idea of having to encode your inline JavaScript, don't worry, there is a trick you can use to get around this. Check out part 2 of this screencast series on X templates to find out how. While processing an array, the special variable hash will provide the current array index plus 1. If I start by numbering the planets, you'll see that it goes sequentially from 1 to 4. You can perform simple arithmetic inside of curly braces, so if you did need the indexing to start at 0, you could just subtract 1. If I include the hash variable in the inner loop, you'll see that this outputs the index of the moons array. As you would expect, the count for a nested list runs independent of the outer list. In all of the examples so far, I've been using blocks delimited with curly braces to insert content dynamically. These substitution blocks are not actually interpreted as JavaScript. Rather, they are parsed and converted into JavaScript expressions under the hood. This allows you to write a kind of shorthand JavaScript, which makes your templates easier to read. It is also possible to embed pure JavaScript inline within a template by wrapping curly braces around square brackets. This gives you more freedom to write whatever arbitrary JavaScript you like, but you'll lose the convenient shorthand variables that are available in substitution blocks. The current object, which is available through the dot variable in curly braces, is referenced instead with the variable values. In curly braces, it's possible to name a property by itself, but when executing inline JavaScript, you have to reference the property through the values object, either using square bracket or object literal notation. For a comparison of the shorthand notation with the inline JavaScript, here are two equivalent statements. The current index, which is available through the hash variable in curly braces, is referenced instead with the variable xIndex. Additionally, you have access to an xCount variable, which represents the length of the array that is currently being iterated through. I'm going to complete my dataset by adding the remaining planets with their moons. It's getting hard to scan the list of moons, so I want to add a comma after each moon. I could just insert this directly into the template, but then I end up with a comma after the final list item, which looks bad. So I'll add some inline JavaScript to output a comma after every list item except for the last one. Refresh the page, and you can see that the desired effect has been achieved. Suppose that in this application, a detailed description of each moon could be found at the path #planet/moon. To draw this path, we need access not only to the name of the current object, but also to its parent object. The current object is always available through the values variable, but you can also access the parent object through the parent variable. If I refresh the page, you'll see that each moon is now a link, and if I click on one, say Mars's moon Phobos for example, you'll see that the URL has been updated with a path to Mars/Phobos. This is part 1 of a 2-part series on X-templates. In this screencast, I've introduced templates and shown how they can be dynamically updated with the content from objects in your application. We discussed basic looping, conditional branching, and using the formatting functions that come bundled with Sencha Touch. In part 2, I show a few techniques that you can use to tidy up your X-templates, making them easier to maintain.